there was a call point about the next set of opportunities. As I'm going, I think it's opportunities research. So, and it's in what the second floor of SBS. We have a size. So, think about doing that before too long. And great timing on that reminder. You should print out. The safest way for you to make sure you're getting your extra credit points is to print out that little thing that you do on, just do a screen print or something, and then just hang on to it. Don't give it to me now, or there's a 90% chance I will lose it. Things can get lost in my office, so they're not really lost. I won't have the wherewithal to take them all out. So it's real nice when kind of hang on to those things. Hard copy is best because I'm old school. And like last day of class, the very last day of class, bring them down here and set them on my desk. That way there's a nice time interval connection between getting those things and actually putting them into the database of scores that you create with your tests. If you neglect to do that, that's no problem. I mean, obviously, I don't get grades calculated until probably the day after the final exam. So, I have a mailbox in the psychology department office. Stick them in there. I check it 2 or 3 times a day. If it shows up anytime before the 24-hour period following the final exam, you get those points. And it doesn't matter when they get added, as you're sure you know. If you add them to a test, or if you add them at the end, they all total into the final total number of points. Okay? And your grade is real simple. You take the 250 points and divide it into the total points you've accumulated on the 3 tests, the final exam, and extra credit. And you go 90%, 80%, 70%, etc. It's really very, very straightforward. Now, what I have not been able to do recently, just because of the size of the class, is, and I don't have an assistant anymore, which was helpful in this regard, is to get you a hard copy version of what it looks like on that last day of class, so you know exactly what you need on the final exam for your score to get you to an A. And you can do the math. 225 points is an A, I think, something like that. 200 is a B, or something. Do the math on it. I'm not here remembering, but it's real easy to figure out exactly what you need on that final exam. And never forget, the final exam is 40% of your grade. So if you have extra credit points, maybe as many as 12, you've got a huge amount of impact on your grades out there. Okay? So, any questions about that? Hard copies, last minute, give it to me at the last minute. Yes?
I would get the hard copy because I went for the last extra points, but they didn't give me anything. I just wrote your name in the log.
Oh, well, let me say this. Most of those hard copies will duplicate. If you're being told by the investigator on whose research you are volunteering to participate, they send me Excel files with your name. I'm just saying, if you really want to make absolutely sure you're getting credit for that, but if you put your name and your student ID or just your student ID into their database, I get that back. And I look at that Excel file and add them in that way too. This hard copy thing is just, for me, a way that nothing gets lost. I would hate for you to participate for as much as even 6 points. 3 points can make a difference, but if you participate for as much as 6 points and somehow don't get credit for them, that could be a lot of great difference. It happens. So I'm just trying to be careful with it, okay? All right. Okay? We finished that last time? You believe we're psychological animals whose psychology affects their biology? Yes, my read is that, there's a lot of doctors out there on the front lines who are treating you all would agree with me that the behavioral factors in your life make all the difference in the world as to how long you're going to live, and what quality you're going to live, what quality of life you're going to enjoy while you are alive. I mean, how you eat, how much you eat, how much you exercise, whether you smoke cigarettes or not, whether you finish your college education, whether you see the glass half full or half empty, whether you're an angry person who carries hostility around with you every day, you can't shake it, you can't put things into the rearview mirror and say, okay, I'm done with that, I gotta forget and move on. All those things influence the likelihood of you becoming ill, and later in life they may well influence the likelihood of you becoming ill in a life-threatening way. And there, I don't know of any physically related risk factors short of getting hit by a bus that's as powerful as those psychological factors. And I'm laying claim to all those, like they may sound a little biological, but you breathe smoke and tar and nicotine into your lungs. That's a behavior. Obviously, it's the tar and nicotine that's probably going to kill you, and that's a very biological event. But I'm sure you see the behavior that we're talking about here that shortens your life. And I hope I didn't get out of that section by mentioning that about 20% of deaths every year alone are directly related to cigarette smoking. So that's something to think about if you're one of those. All right, am I going in and out? I hear myself going in and out of this microphone, but you're getting me the whole time up there? Okay, good. Well, maybe it's my brain and not this microphone. But let's go on to, I should introduce this section as the bread and butter of the private practitioner. The anxiety disorder. What would I mean by that? A lot of people seek mental health professional treatment for these disorders and for depression. Why? Because anxiety is a distressing state of affairs when it doesn't go away, just like depression is. How long we're sad may determine what kinds of lengths we will go to get help from someone. Well, the same is true about the anxiety disorder. And of course, we have a very interesting anxiety disorder in the news, don't we? And you're probably wondering what the hell is he talking about. The vipers. How many people have read the story about the vipers or saw it on TV? Okay, that is about 3 of you. All right, so there's a vipers. How many people know who the vipers are? Okay, good, that's better. All right, the Vipers are a D-League team down here. It's kind of like a minor league team for the Houston Rockets. And they send their players down here when they don't quite make the cut, and then there's an injury on the team, and they bring them up. I think that's pretty much the way it goes. And the Vipers carry that team in a different league, and they display really, really good basketball skills right here in the Valley. And there are many followers. But apparently they are not your age. They're probably Winter Texans keeping the Vipers alive down here. But so there's this guy on Houston. I'm going to tell you about his clinical situation because he's told the whole world. So I guess I'm not giving away any secrets here. But he's on the Houston Rockets making a mere $3 million a year. And they're trying to get him on a plane to go to the various places where they play basketball. And he has an airline flight phobia. Well, that was brought to my attention by Fox News a while back, and I addressed that. I did a radio interview that when I find out what it's going to be, I'll tell you what you'll probably want to listen to it, but it does address the issue of airline phobia and has a specific phobia. A diagnosis within the category that of these anxiety disorders that we're about to visit. And, and I said I was confused, really, why he would not be seeking a technique of behavior therapy called systematic desensitization. I'll describe it to you as we get later into this segment of the course. Because it's about 90% effective on phobic behavior. Very, very effective procedure. A little time-consuming, a little harder than popping a pill. But why wouldn't they just give this guy some Valium and put him on a plane? Any ideas about that? Let's say you're the team doctor here. Why don't you just slip him some Xanax? Pardon? Well, but that would get him to the next game, right? Yeah. I think what you're getting at, maybe it'll affect his performance. These minor tranquilizers, as they're called, these benzodiazepines, affect the muscular system. If you're a skilled athlete making money off of your skills, last thing you want to be doing is taking something that affects your muscular system. So this is not an easy problem to solve. This guy is scared to death to get on an airplane, and yet you can't drive to New York and get there on time. Like John Madden did, another famous airline phobic, some of you may know, a former coach, NFL coach and TV announcer of games. They had to make this guy a recreational vehicle to drive from Sunday to Sunday's games because he, even to this day, will not step on a plane. So these phobias, you're going to find out, can be just absolutely inconsequential, and we live with them, and we're just kind of mildly neurotic, and they don't affect our lives, and so what? Or they can have tremendous import, as they are for a guy who's making $3 million a year and isn't going to continue to make $3 million a year if he's playing for the Vipers the rest of his career. All right? He needs to be able to get over this, get back to Houston and jump on a plane where they're going here, there, and everywhere during basketball season. So, when I did that radio interview, if you heard the radio interview, that's all the information I had about him. I didn't know anything about his situation because I don't follow the NBA or professional basketball, so I didn't know the story. But turns out he also has a generalized anxiety disorder, a little OCD to throw in on it. Now, why should I have known that before I was addressing the issue of phobias? I should know that because there's several people in this room who have phobias that they probably work their lives in such a way that they avoid the things they're phobic about, and it has almost no impact on their life. Can't say that for this guy, but on top of it, his phobia is embedded in the generalized anxiety disorder, slightly more complicated, and he has some OCD fallout as well, even more complicated. So, this Fox guy came to interview me for a brief TV thing, and I said that, first of all, those people who are being impatient with this young man need to understand that you don't go around faking symptoms when $3 million a year is at risk, okay? So this man is legitimately frightened of getting on a plane, and if that isn't an indication of the level of sincerity that he has about the fact that he is indeed so anxious he cannot find the wherewithal to step up the ramp on that plane and let it take off, what better measure would there be? $3 million on the line, a career on the line, okay? So make no mistake about it, this guy has a real, honest-to-goodness anxiety disorder, and after the fact, I find out he's got actually 3 different anxiety disorders, comorbidly, as they call it in the business. So, that does make for a horse of a different color, but as the interviewer was going out the door, I said, he's getting a lot of media attention about this. And I say to you that that's not a good thing, because there's a certain point, and this is one of the, if you will, some of the stuff you're going to get in this course mainstream is pretty straightforward. no rocket science, I've already told you that, but there are subtleties. There are subtleties to think about when people become, quote, let me rephrase that. When people are told they have an illness. When someone walks in your door and you characterize what I just described to you as an illness, what are you telling them about their ability to fix it? They must be treated. Isn't there an implicit message? You have an illness. What do you do when you have an illness? You go to the doctor, and the doctor treats the illness. I suggest to you, as I suggested to him, that there may be some undercurrent of additional difficulties now mounting because there's a great deal of attention being shed on him nationally and even internationally about how this illness is affecting his ability to function. So that consequence in Skinnerian terms may, in a very subtle way, strengthen his conviction that he is ill and must be fixed. Someone else now is responsible for the change in his behavior and not him. Does this make sense to you? It's really a very, very important idea that I hope I can get through to you throughout this course. When you diagnose an illness, the message is you're not going to get better until you're treated. And while part of that may well be true, it puts that person in a very helpless situation. And the more now that he is out there, as now he has become an advocate for the general population to understand generalized anxiety disorder, which has now been the number one focus rather than the phobia itself. But it's the phobia that's keeping this guy from performing, or not from performing, no, not from performing, from getting to where he's supposed to perform. And as long as he believes, and now is advocating for this as an illness, there's a whole new ball game. If you will, think about a problem as an onion. There's that core of that onion, and then there's layers around it, aren't there, sometimes? He's adding, I think, a layer of onto that onion that makes that onion a bigger onion. And more layers to peel off as we try to help this man take better control of his life. So the last thing, thankfully the reporter remembered and thought about that last statement I made. And at the end of the piece that he did on Channel 2, he said, but Professor Ernst says that maybe the worst thing that can happen to him is what I'm doing right now, providing him with media attention. Does anybody follow this? I mean, does this make sense to you? He's on Dr. Phil Thursday. All right? So, is that a good thing? First of all, Dr. Phil's an entertainer who probably can't psychotherapize his way out of a wet paper bag at this point in his career because he's too busy being the wealthy entertainer that he is. And of course, the way to become or stay a wealthy entertainer is to have controversial things on your program, like the guy who seduced that that Notre Dame football player and sustained a relationship with him for 2 years by the internet, and this guy didn't figure out. Did you see that story? Well, that's a whole other story. I want to stick with the Vipers guy here. But I just think this is extraordinarily dangerous for him, and he doesn't understand. Is he doing this on purpose? No, this man feels out of control. So out of control that he has at risk $3 million a year in salary. So clearly, we're not saying this guy is manufacturing this stuff. What we are saying is that even without his own knowledge, what he is doing is reinforcing, strengthening his own illness by making public proclamations about the illness that he has. And there's a school of thought that I follow that says, the longer whether you have it or not, the longer you say you have something, the more reality having that takes on. That's why we tell depressed people to do things that are non-depressed. Because the more they do things that reveal a difference in in mood from depression, the more they all of a sudden are not depressed. So you see your mood often follows your behavior. It isn't that your mood dictates your behavior. You are what you do, is what this sort of thing suggests. It's a very important message in that. And that is, as soon as you consider yourself the victim of something that descended on you, you have already lost half the battle. Does this make sense to you at all? It's very important from the standpoint of what we're going to look at in the way of the anxiety and mood disorders, because you must have a participating individual who shakes loose of the idea that he is being victimized by something he woke up with one morning, which he didn't wake up with one morning. There's a long history, I am sure, of how this phobia developed, embedded in probably an already existing set of symptoms that we characterize as GAD. You'll know exactly what that is before you leave today. And all of this requires certain experiences. It's not something like a fever that you wake up with in the morning. It has to do with how you behave when confronted with things that frighten you in the real world. And the dynamics for someone trying to deal with that and the etiology of how it began, that is, what the origins of it are as different as everyone in this room is different. They could be experiences related to the way mom and dad protected this person, or it could be that mom and dad didn't do anything to help this person develop these skills, and as he didn't develop these skills, other people started making a lot of notice of his vulnerabilities, and then the vulnerabilities get worse and worse. There's a dozen different pathways to getting there. All of them are on a path called experience. And there is no generalized anxiety disorder that someone wakes up with one morning and, I got this illness now, I'm going to have this treated. Or it's like diabetes, all I can do is control it. There are mental health professionals that would want you to believe that, and I'm here as one of a growing number of mental health professionals to tell you to reject that idea from day one. There was a hand up over here. Yes?
I was going to say, experiences, I don't know if you heard in the news of the drummer from, I can't remember the band, that he canceled his tour to Australia because he didn't want to get on the plane, because he had been in a previous crash with another band that they all died except for...
Oh, wow. Yeah. All right, so there's a good example, too. Here's a musician, probably top dollar type musician.
Yes, I can't remember the name, but it was one of those famous ones.
So, pardon?
Yeah, him.
What is his name? Travis Barker?
Yeah.
Okay, well, whatever, he's whatever his name is, he's turning down a lot of money and proving to you that this man is legitimately, and I hope he doesn't lose this in this man is legitimately frightened, so frightened that he will refuse to get on that plane with nothing else ever done. If you try to force him on that plane, I've read it with guys 6'6" and 260 pounds, good luck with that. But if you try to force him on that plane, he will fight you tooth and nail. So the point there is, here's another person that there's no doubt these phobias are real, and they prove it by what losses they will sustain as a function of being unwilling to challenge their own anxiety. And again, either you look at anxiety as something that descended on you overnight, you woke up with it, and damn, aren't you unlucky, or you look at anxiety as a response. Who does your responding for you? You do. It's part of your behavioral repertoire. And if you have it, you've got to learn a way to either do things that are incompatible with it so that it becomes less a part of your life, or manage it more effectively so that when you experience it, you can keep it at a level that does not paralyze you with respect to the things that the anxiety is connected to, in this case, getting on a plane. playing. And I'm here to tell you, systematic desensitization and flooding, you're going to hear more about it before we get out of this segment. They're extraordinarily effective. I mean, like, we're talking 90% effective here. So, and that was my first question to this interviewer. I'm puzzled why the Houston Rockets administration didn't know, the doctors there didn't know about this technique. What do you think? They probably didn't know, don't know about this technique, because there's another approach being so strongly marketed as we speak. But it became an approach that was not the right approach for this particular person, i.e. drugs. You cannot give drugs to a professional athlete and expect that it's not going to affect his ability to perform. Now, when you get to be a person who can demand $3 million a year for your athletic performance, I don't have to tell you, you are one in a million, because you are that skilled. You take just the slightest edge off of that ability to perform, and you ain't making $3 million anymore. You're now at the level of 1 in 60,000, which isn't enough to make the cut. So that's the fine motor sort of skill issue we're dealing with here. And I'm absolutely confident. I'll be very interested to see what Dr. Phil has to say. It'll be one of the few times that I probably sustain a full session of Dr. Phil. But I'll be very interested to see what he has to say. We'll all maybe have a look and see if he's doing his, what is it? Get over it, or get real. That's it. Get real. Or whatever his approach is. Let's see if he knows the real resources, and let's see if he understands the etiology. I would not be surprised at all if he ends up in the avenue of SSRIs or benzodiazepines, and wondering why his man won't take them. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Thursday. What time does he come on? Anybody know? 4 in the afternoon. Good. Okay, I can make that. Go watch it on Thursday. Let's talk about it on Friday. And see. See where it goes. This shouldn't be on whatever that's called. But here's where we're going. Hey, look, here are the anxiety disorders. That's every one of them. Why is that? Is that the lighting? Is this okay? It looks real light to me. So these are them. I have put it in. I put it in yellow or whatever that color is. The ones we're going to visit. And of course, I've already told you the PTSD as an anxiety disorder is a DSM-4 way of classifying PTSD. And the authors of your textbook, actually, in a very defendable way, already included in the material you read in the previous segment. So, suffice it to say, it's still pretty much considered an anxiety disorder because we don't have, there used to be a category called stress-related disorders, and it would fit better there. But there isn't that. There is no such thing, by the way, again, as an anxiety disorder. Doesn't exist. That's not a diagnosis. But there are a group of diagnoses that are characterized as anxiety disorders. And they are so characterized because, should this be a test question waiting to happen? It's very important. It's going to be very hard for you to remember. They are characterized as anxiety disorders because at the core, anxiety correlates with symptoms in some way or another. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Once again, as promised, no rocket science here. There are anxiety disorders because anxiety is at the core of every one of these disorders. If you look at the symptoms, they are connected to how the person copes with anxiety. Usually, they are working very hard to escape from or avoid anxiety. That's why they're called the anxiety disorders. Okay, GAD, panic disorder, we'll visit that in significant detail. It was very crippling. That's going to happen sooner or later. This should help. Yeah. All I want for Christmas is a new microphone. No, it's not a microphone, it is the sound system. Am I still coming in back there? Thank you. Let me do this. This should help. All right, so these are them. We're going to visit each one of them, except the ones in white. Those are not very interesting. And often they're usually seen in different situations. I'm covering the disorders that you're going to find primarily in the mental health business arena. The community mental health center, the private practice of the mental health professional, whether that be an LPC, clinical social worker, clinical psychologist, or any of the other many mental health professionals. A few points of clarification. You must understand there's more than one way to do this. I'm giving you my biased but accurate way. This is the easiest way to understand the difference between fear and anxiety. What you're seeing on the slide is a bit of a mixture of the way historically these two concepts have been approached definitionally. Fear, people talk about fear as more of a here and now, clearly connected to the fight or flight response, whereas anxiety is more future-oriented. Apprehension is a term that easily connects with future. Fear is something that happens right now, and you respond to it almost reflexively. It is connected to the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic division that gets activated. You remember all that? It gets activated, and blood pressure goes up, and the blood goes to the muscles rather than to the gut and the brain because you need the wherewithal to flee or fight. Your pupils dilate, that whole thing. You remember that? I mean, you've had that covered in 1 or 2 or 3 different courses. That indeed is the fear response. That is the fight or fight response. But I'm going to have you remember the difference between fear and anxiety in this way. Fear is rational. Anxiety is irrational. Typically, if you want to think about it in biological and behavioral terms, we would go to the old physiologist from Russia, Ivan Pavlov, and say, fear is an unconditioned response. Anxiety is a conditioned response. Put another way, anxiety is typically learned. Fear takes very little learning. When you're confronted by a rabid dog, fear will work well for you. It will mobilize you to run as fast as you can unless you're a very skilled kickboxer or whatever it might take to fight that animal. When you look at a situation in which someone is confronted with fear, battle, war, being robbed, assaulted, raped, all of those things are absolutely, unquestionably rational places to exhibit fear. An elevator is not something that should elicit fear in anyone, and therefore when we see a fear reaction, because the reaction itself is the same, whether it's anxiety or fear. Same autonomic nervous system, same sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, same fight or flight response, same energizing of all these systems that will get you ready to either fight or get the hell out. Same response, different stimulus. In this situation, I'm sorry, But rationally, the elevator is not something that should elicit fear. Indeed, the walkway into the airplane is not a situation that should invoke fear. Unless you say, well, but it could crash. If that's the case, then you must say, if that's rational, then it is irrational for you to get in your car and drive to school. Because the likelihood of you getting hurt on the way to school in a car so far exceeds the likelihood of a plane crashing that you're going to get on. I don't care if it's going to Houston or Boston. The likelihood is much less. So you see, along the way, somewhere, you, the clinician, is going to have to make a judgment, aren't you? You're going to have to say, this is definitely anxiety because this situation does not threaten the individual from a life or death standpoint. Interestingly enough, some people acquire anxiety to relatively harmless things that when you force them into it, they look like they're going through a life or death process. They are so frightened by it. But the point here is, and the good news, is that we know the means by which these responses are acquired, and there are behavior therapy techniques like desensitization and flooding that recognize the job is to extinguish that anxiety response. And if you can extinguish the anxiety response, you demotivate the behaviors that we characterize as symptoms. Most notably in specific phobia. Could you imagine someone saying, I'm not afraid at all, and I feel absolutely no anxiety. In fact, I'm really quite relaxed now. I'm having a great day, having a lot of fun with friends, but I can't get on that elevator. Well, is the elevator friendly? No, I just can't do it. It wouldn't happen. If the person was honest with you, they would say, if I get on that elevator, I am going to have the panic attack of my life, and I am not going to do it. So you see how the response in that stimulus situation evokes, or that stimulus situation evokes a response that is so powerful, it often paralyzes someone. So the easy way to handle it is avoid it. Now, if you buy this acquisition extinction model, I want you to think about this little animal experiment that was done. They don't do them anymore because this by now would be a very difficult experiment to employ amongst animals because of the animal rights laws, which are very good that they're in place. But there's some alcoholism researchers that in the past studied this phenomenon of what causes people to be afraid of something they shouldn't be afraid of, and literally will not go into an area where it might occur. Here's what they did. They had a shuttle box. A shuttle box is something which in this case was used with dogs. You can do it with rats as well. And it's a long rectangular thing which has a compartment here and a compartment here and a door that goes up here. And they got lights on in each compartment. And what happens is the experimenter turned on the light, and 10 seconds later, the animal felt electric shock on the floor. Not one that would hurt them, but one that stings, like electric shock does when it doesn't hurt you. But it stings. And the animal saw that the door was open at that point and jumped into the other compartment, hence shuttle. So now the animal's in the other compartment, safe, the floor is fine. But there's a light on this side. The light goes on, 10 seconds later, shock to the feet, that stings, door opens, boom, they're back in the other side. No lights on, they're on the floor's fine. Light comes on, what's going to happen? Can you predict? Door comes open, light comes on. Boom. How soon is it going to take? How many times does the animal have to experience the shock in the presence of the light before he's jumping to the other side? Sometimes we call it one trial learning. Yeah, you might try 2 or 3 if he's tough. But make no mistake about it. This animal learns very quickly to shoot into the other side where it is safe. Now, we turn the light on again. He shuttles, goes to the other side of the shuttle box. Turn on the light again. He's going to the other side. Guess what's not happening? He's not getting shot. Okay, so now what you're going to do as the experimenter, you're going to turn the shock machine off. And you're going to say, hey, dog, I just turned the shock machine off, so you don't have to worry about it anymore, right? Well, that's kind of what happens in the human situation, as you'll find out in a minute. But now you're turning the light on. Is he waiting 9.5 seconds to jump? No. He's lucky, or you're lucky, if you see him wait 1/2 of 1 second, and he's jumping. And in fact, picture this. Light on, jump, light on, jump, light on, jump, light on, jump. How often will he do that before he tests what happens at the 10-second mark? 4,000 times. And in some cases, the session is just terminated because the animal is exhausted. And you can't legitimately continue the experiment if the animal is so exhausted, it doesn't even have the energy to jump the next time the light comes on. But what could you do? You've got two choices here that connect with very powerful strategies. First of all, by the way, is a light the kind of thing that should be frightening to someone that they would, or to a dog that they would keep jumping like that? How did the animal get afraid of a light? Light doesn't hurt anybody. Anybody know? If I could do it, I would have my guest lecturer here today, Ivan Pavlov, to tell you that the light, because of its association with the shock, has now taken on properties of the shock. Like the shock, is a frightening situation. It is a phobia. Because you bring somebody in who doesn't know what was going on, they'd say, this animal's neurotic. I've never seen an animal run away from a light, right? Never seen a human not get on an elevator. What's the deal about this elevator, okay? So, but now we got to fix them, don't we? So how do we do this? We only have one way with him. With you, we have two. The second way that we have with you that we don't have with him is to say, will you please listen to me? There will be no shock. I've turned it off. Please understand, you don't have to jump to that stupid light anymore. All right, that's not going to work with a dog. Well, what will work? Don't open the door. The animal's not going to go crashing through that door because the light's on, because he can't do that anyhow. He may get extraordinarily nervous, might even lose his bladder, but he'll recognize that light's been on quite a while now and I haven't been shot. So now open the door, and he might go to the other side, close it, turn the light on. He might be a little nervous. It might even try to get out. The light stays on, and guess what? No shock. Open the door, and before long, I think you can see where this is going. He's traveling back and forth with the light on. It doesn't matter at all. Why? Because you forced him to test whether or not he was going to get shocked. And you, if you will, extinguished the anxiety response to the light. And that's what it was. The response to the shock would be fear. The response to the light, anxiety. He should respond. The shock was a painful stimulus. It is important for people to escape from and avoid painful stimuli for their own survival. But when they become connected to stimuli that have no meaning whatsoever with regard to life and death, we then have, in this case, a neurotic dog. So what if you were in that jump box? What's the second thing I could do with you? I wouldn't be telling you necessarily if the light isn't on anymore. How could I get you by some other method to stop running every time that light comes on? The one most effective way is to figure out how to create something other than the fight or flight response occurring. We know that it has to do with a whole lot of things going on inside that people interpret, perceive, and interpret as uncomfortable, and to remove themselves, they do something. Well, we're going to teach you to do something else. We're going to teach you to engage in a parasympathetically driven autonomic response that when it occurs, that autonomic sympathetic response cannot get off the ground. And that is systematic desensitization. How do we teach you to do a parasympathetic response? We give you a drug and knock you out. No, of course not, unless you are still awake. What we do is teach you. Works better than a drug. We teach you how to engage in a parasympathetically driven response that's called relaxation. So in other words, if anxiety provokes you to do things that you probably shouldn't be doing because it's a waste of your time, and the anxiety, not only that, the anxiety is not a fun thing to experience, then we teach you how to perform a response that is incompatible with anxiety when the stimuli are around that are eliciting the anxiety. It's really simple, and it works. If the person gets out of the mode of, I'm ill, I'm a victim, I need a medicine to fix my illness, and comes into the mode saying, I have to learn new skills to deal with a situation that in and of itself is not truly life-threatening. So that's the difference between fear and anxiety. Anxiety is the target of the treatment program. And once removed, you have removed the motivation for the anxiety connected. Okay, we'll go through the diagnostic criteria for the disorder on Wednesday. And then Thursday, we all watch Dr. Phil. I can't believe it was out of the house. But Thursday, we watch Dr. Phil, and Friday, we talk about it.
I'm gonna go for question.
Like a bone marrow transplant is almost.
Oh, then I will, yeah, then I will get that. And don't worry about it at all. Yeah, you'll get credit for it. But some, and I understand, you just don't see eye to eye on this, that they think you can only use it for one course.